And we can all say the Pledge of Allegiance to something. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. So we do a roll call first. We start with the folks in the room.
Everett Clark.
Lila Atkins.
Jason Henry. Tim Broderick.
Okay. The rest of you just kind of go for it.
Brandy
Karen Haritono.
Eunice Landry.
Eliza Trolley.
Julie Brown.
Okay.
Jay Fitzpatrick.
Heidi Duford.
And then we have the recorder on as well, Lynn. All right. So first, public input. Do we have any public input on the line? Is Tom back? I'm not sure that he is.
Yep, we are here. We are here. If there's anyone on the public line that would like to comment, hit *6 to unmute yourself. We only have a few at the moment. Looks like we're good.
Okay, great. Agenda review.
Accept the agenda.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, all those in favor by roll call. Julie?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Eunice?
Yes.
Everett?
Yes.
Lila?
Yes.
Jason?
Yes.
Eliza?
Yes.
And Brandy?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Make a motion to approve the minutes of August 4th, 2020. So Jason.
Second. Lila.
Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor by roll call. Julie?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Eunice?
I think I need to abstain.
Okay. Everett?
Abstain.
Lila?
Yes.
Jason?
Yes.
Eliza?
Yes.
And Brandy?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Board superintendent, principal, and student rep communications. Let's start with Jay, if you have anything for us.
Well, we are in
Busy?
the midst. Yeah, we've been real busy. At this point, we're waiting for you guys to cross your T's and dot your I's tonight, and then we move a little bit faster than what we have been. We have letters that are about 90% done, communications that are about 90% done, ready to go out. We've made a pretty significant effort over the past week and a half to engage every family member. We put out a survey, which I'm sure several of you have received. In that survey, we were asking basic questions such as, are you planning on coming back? If so, are you going to opt for the hybrid model, or are you going to go with the full remote option? We've inquired about bus transportation. And we as of 3 o'clock this afternoon, we had 342 respondents of about 433 enrolled students. So we've made pretty good strides. And just today, we finished contacting all of the freshman parents. So our goal in this is to collect the data that we can certainly use for scheduling purposes, but then to also get parents on board using Infinite Campus, since it's going to be our primary method to communicate with parents. So we've made contact with every freshman parent at this point. And by contact, I mean we have either left a voicemail, we have spoken to, or they have left a message for us that we've gotten back to. So we've engaged with as many freshman parents as we can at this point. And I keep bringing them up because many of the upperclassmen parents already know the system, and we are going to put effort in moving forward starting tomorrow to try to engage all of them as well. Once everything is finalized tonight in terms of our reopening plan, we'll move forward with more planning and more communications to families. There are a couple of items tonight that will need to be discussed that are important that I'll have to include in the letter, but there are decisions that we're going to have to make. And scheduling wise, I think we're good. The counseling office under Justin's leadership has done a tremendous job. They've worked with Tom with Infinite Campus to create the cohorts of students and keeping our numbers where they need to be in terms of the Group A and Group B balance. So I have to commend them. Everybody's working real hard to make sure that the opening is as smooth as it's going to be given the circumstance. So unless anyone has any other questions, I'm going to stay quiet and answer any questions you have throughout the night.
Thank you.
I had a couple of questions for Jay just about what he just talked about. So am I correct? We still don't have responses from about 100 students?
Just under 100, yes.
Okay, wow. And as far as the Infinite Campus communication, I've heard some comments from some parents just about the process for that being a little cumbersome. Like an email comes to tell you to go sign on to Infinite Campus to read something. And is that correct?
Yes.
Is there any way that we can push emails out of Infinite Campus to parents and family members?
I don't know if I understand your question.
Well, the comments I've heard from parents is that it's sometimes cumbersome, especially if they're trying to do the communication on their phone to sign into Infinite Campus after getting an email. And they were wondering if it's possible just to get the information in emails rather than signing into Infinite Campus when it's a notification that's, kind of school-wide or, for example.
Yep. So parents have the ability to, in Infinite Campus, they can go in and check what type of notifications they choose.
Okay.
So you can use the Infinite Campus portal. You can use the app in which you can look at it and what is ultimately the inbox. So if you think of social media, the Facebook page or whatever social media, let's say Facebook, there's the inbox that comes up in your stream, and that is one way to access messages that I'm sending out. But the emails that I send out as well, it's the same message that's being sent in the inbox, through the inbox, and to the emails. But Infinite Campus is how we're able to send out mass emails to everyone's, that I'm able to send out mass emails to everyone's personal emails. So if they're having a problem with accessing the messages that I'm sending out, they need to go into the notifications and make sure that they have the boxes checked to be receiving the emails, not just the Infinite Campus inbox messages.
Okay.
Okay.
I will pass that on.
Have them call the school, and my administrative assistant will walk them through how to check off what box they need to. But they can get messages through text message, through email, and through the Infinite Campus inbox, and voice messages as well.
Okay. And just since we're talking about it, aside from, freshman orientation, is there a time or a place where parents could get an update on how to use Infinite Campus, especially since we may have a lot of more communications going out?
We do have some instructional videos that we can send out that we've made over the years. I believe, and Tom, if you're listening, you can hop in on this one. I believe the initial email that we send to parents asking them to register has some quick how-tos within it. But we can certainly send some videos out, some instructional videos out. I do go over that with freshman parents during orientation, as well as how to navigate through some of the more important pieces of Infinite Campus, that being attendance and grades.
Okay.
We can certainly go on the offensive to do a better job of getting that info out.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to pass on those comments.
All right, cool. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions for Jay? Okay. Moving on to Tim for the superintendent report.
You want to just wait until we get to item 8A?
Yes,
pretty
that's
much what I
fine.
have for you.
Okay. Are you addressing athletics during that presentation, Tim? That was the only sort of open question that I had. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Great. Okay. Sorry, I have to keep flipping back and forth to the agenda. We have no student rep, I assume. So, information action items. Item 8A, reopening plan.
So we do. Good. Pam,
Yeah.
we did not approve the minutes, the non-public minutes from August 4th, 2020,
Okay.
which we need to approve. So I'll make a motion before to approve the non-public minutes from August 4th, 2020.
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay. Vote by roll call. Julie?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes?
Eunice?
Abstain.
Everett?
Abstain.
Lila?
Yes.
Jason?
Yes.
Eliza?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Okay. And I wanted to note that Sharon Stewart also joined the call. Welcome, Sharon. Okay.
So for everyone on the board's call, I'm going to be using a presentation in present mode. For the public who are listening, you'll be able to hear me. This is also a presentation that is posted on the SAU 301 Facebook page. It has been, if you're a staff member, emailed to all staff. Board members received it in email earlier today. A stream of this recording will be posted on the SAU 301 YouTube channel, probably in the morning tomorrow after this meeting. So there will be ways to see this, and if you want to run to Facebook right now, if you're listening on the phone, you can find it on the Prospect Mountain High School SAU 301 Facebook page. So I'm going to shift into present mode, and then because this is a development, this presentation of the August 4th presentation, I'm going to do my best to highlight the things that are new or different, rather than, sorry, I hit the wrong button. That's what I meant to say. Kim, can you see this? Is this working?
It's working on my end.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I know this took a long time the first time, and one of my goals here is to focus on the things that are different and that need to be discussed. But if I move quickly over something and a board member either wants to jot down a note to come back to it with a question, please do. Or if you want to interrupt with a question, please do that as well. Since we spoke on the 4th, both Jay and I have had a lot of opportunities to speak with teachers, with parents, with students. We've been able to nail down some additional details that you'll see here tonight, and we've received a lot of feedback. If you're in the presentation, you'll see this table of contents is new, and that's because I really tried to format this as a public document that would be easy for folks to access and find things in as they may be reviewing it in the coming days. Our goal hasn't changed. I think the first time you saw this language might have been in June. We want to be in school. We think it's better for students, and there's a lot of data that supports that. Having said that, we know there's a place for technology in education. we can come up with a blend that we believe works, and we believe that we've learned a lot since last spring from some of the things we tried during what I've been calling emergency remote learning. So this is a blended plan, a conservative plan to get us back into the school, and hopefully it goes well, and we're able to ramp up to full on-site engagement over time. This chart you saw a couple of weeks ago. At that time, there were, I believe, 11 coronavirus cases in Belknap County. Yesterday, there are 6. So the trend has continued downward. When I last spoke to you, I think there were 323. There were over 300 cases in New Hampshire. There were 279 as of yesterday. So we've continued to trend in the right direction. This isn't intended for you to be able to read the graphic. It's an example of a dashboard that's available to us as we continue to track data from day to day and week to week. And over on the right, this is the first place. This is a new slide. You haven't seen this before. And this is the first place in tonight's presentation that I introduce our recommendation around how to make decisions about staying open, staying on track, or even closing the school. This is a decision for the board. You're going to hear this a few times because I think it's really important that you make this decision with your eyes open and make sure you're comfortable. But what I am proposing is that you authorize me to close the school if necessary for up to 5 days. Anything more than that, I would have to consult with you. But given what we've experienced in the last 6 months, I think we've all learned that there are moments when moving quickly is the right thing to do. I'll give you some more parameters around how I will think about these conditions, particularly in the month of September. And quite frankly, beyond the month of September, as far as I'm concerned, your guess is as good as mine as to what conditions are going to look like. So for me to develop some kind of a data-based system that tells you what I'll do or we should do in October and November, to me, it just doesn't make sense. We have enough to do right now with information that we do have to be trying to imagine information that we can't possibly have. It's just a bridge too far. So this is going to be my proposal around how do we know when to continue on the schedule, when do we slow down, and when do we actually close the doors. As before, I believe this is a very conservative plan. We've had a lot of feedback from stakeholders. There's a lot in the news about how resistant children, particularly younger children, might be to this virus. Teenagers maybe a little bit less so. But we have adults who work in this building, and a lot of them have been very concerned. So we've had we spent a lot of time having conversations with staff. Again, I think we've come up with a good conservative way to ease back in. And the fact that we believe we can do a decent job of improving remote learning definitely plays a role in our thinking and in these recommendations. Moving along, you first saw these guiding principles about improving remote learning back on June 2nd. They haven't changed. And that brings us to the reopening plan. Again, it's kind of formatted for quick reference now for staff or members of the public who may be looking things up in the coming weeks. Sorry about the yellow background. It's only a couple of slides. This hasn't changed. So this part A, these 2 slides are about some people would refer to it as a 4x4 block, but it's a 4-period schedule where a full credit class lasts 1 semester instead of the entire year. We've already talked about that and some of the reasons why we felt like that would make sense, particularly with regards to executive functioning for students and the number of obligations they have to manage on a weekly basis. This is the second slide on the same topic, and the only thing I would like to highlight here is that Jay Fitzpatrick and I have meetings with our bus companies later this week, and as he already mentioned and Karen noted, about 90 families have not yet responded to us. So as of right now, our need for bus transportation is at about 22% of students, which is right in the range we were predicting, but we don't have a final number yet. So we're going to try to assemble our bus schedules by the end of the week and then hope they don't change. The worst case scenario I see is that it impacts the 9 o'clock start and the 2:40 to 3 o'clock dismissal one way or another by 5 or 10 minutes. But our intention is to try to hit the target we've set here and throughout this plan. Part B is about getting back into the building, and again, you've seen this slide, but I really think it's one of the most important things that we've done here. Teachers and their representatives have agreed with us, at least in principle, that using remote technologies for all students, whether they are students whose families have chosen to keep them fully remote or students who are coming to the school, using remote technologies to run everything will form the foundation of all we do with teaching and learning at the school for the entire year. So even if students are coming in and in the classroom with their teachers, everything they're doing is in Google Classroom. This means that if a student who's coming to school has to go home for 5 days because they have some symptoms that the CDC tells us might be coronavirus symptoms, and we want that student out of school for a few days, that the student doesn't have to miss anything, can connect remotely. We do need to think about attendance differently under these conditions. That'll bring us around to some of the policy ramifications, but I'm going to get to that a little bit later. This is the same proposed calendar for September that you saw 2 weeks ago. We do PD from the 31st through September 3rd, freshman orientation, and staff are still doing some PD and planning at the same time, the 4-day week after Labor Day. So again, it's a conservative approach where we bring students in on the 14th of September. This is new. We have a little more detail here this evening, thanks to Jay and his team. And I know it's not just administrators, he consulted with some teachers as well on what would make sense. But there's more detail here about what these days look like. And I think this goes to some of the questions that came up on August 4th. So there's what we call I'm going to skip back and forth between 2 slides here, but for those not looking at pictures here, there are 2 days for students who are not in the building, and one is a remote instructional day, and that's every Wednesday in this plan. And then there are remote work days, which are days when we don't have required synchronous classes, but we expect that teachers and students are engaged and working. So an R day, as I'm calling it, is that Wednesday model. It's a remote day. There's a synchronous schedule of classes and attendance is required in those sessions. And then there's a work day, and the proposal that we've fleshed out here a little bit is that we'll follow the same schedule, but those classes could be synchronous or asynchronous, and student attendance can be by arrangement with the teachers, meaning it could be individual conferencing or small group engagement or things like that. The way this will break down ultimately in a fully remote system or fully remote mode, I think works pretty well. We're going to get to that in a couple of minutes. But to start September, we would now look at Monday and Tuesday as cohort A and cohort B. This is the same thing you saw on August 4th. This remote instructional day, what I'm now calling an R day for all students and staff engaged synchronously on Wednesday. That includes our fully remote students, which right now I think we're looking at about 45 students electing to remain fully remote. So again, maybe 20% of our population. Thursday and Friday become W days or remote work days. So students are working, teachers are available, conducting small group tutoring sessions, if you want to call them that, individual meetings, providing support, giving feedback, formative assessment, all those sorts of things on those days. This is only for these first couple of weeks of September before we ramp up again into this intermediate step where the cohorts of in-person students come in on Monday and Tuesday. Then we do that remote day again on Wednesday with all students together. So the cohort A and B students, along with our fully remote students, are all in those classes together, meaning that our remote students are still a part of the community. They still have a connection with their peers in those synchronous sessions at least once a week. And then we have students in the building on Thursday and Friday as well. This hasn't changed. I've already been over this, so I'm going to move on, and we can always come back if we need to. And then phase 3 would be when we no longer have to observe the same social distancing rules, and we can put both cohorts in the school at the same time. So right now, we've limited classroom capacities to 10 to 12 students. I think Jay can confirm this, but Justin's folks in the counseling office were able to construct schedules where we won't have more than 10 students in any one section in either cohort. So we met our target there. And when that's no longer a concern and we can have up to 20 students in a classroom, we can bring all the desks back in out of storage that we've moved, and we can go to this schedule where everybody who's coming to school in person comes in on those 4 days. And we continue to have that remote day on Wednesday for all students, including those 40 or 50 or so who have chosen to be completely remote, at least for the time being. If we have to go back, I'm calling it, to fully remote learning at some point when we're closed, then the schedule becomes a combination of only remote instructional or R days and remote work or W days, excuse me. This is harder than it looks. Everybody attends those synchronous classes together. We've already said that. This is where there's a little more detail. Again, Jay consulted with other administrators, with teachers, consulted some research. And we've come up with a schedule that you're about to see where the required synchronous meetings will be 30 minutes long. A lot more than that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. And then we'll break up the rest of the day into other periods. Now I'm going to move to the next slide and then talk about how this works and why we think it's good. Yeah, maybe that's the slide I want, so I'll go back. To the previous one. Actually, I'll go back to the previous one now, and then we'll get there. So in fully remote, we'd have 3 remote instructional days. That's synchronous required attendance in 30-minute sessions, and then 2 work days each week. For those of you who might have had children in the school last spring, you'll recognize that this is significantly more structure than we had during emergency remote learning in the spring, but that's one of the lessons that we learned. It may not be Monday, Wednesday, Friday with work days on Tuesdays and Thursdays as this shows. This is just an example. I think that's to be determined. As of right now, I'm not expecting to be fully remote real soon. Things seem to be going well, and I think we're all planning to be in the school. But if we do have to do it, just so you have a little bit more of the backup detail here, on a remote instructional day over on the left, you have the 4 required attendance periods, each occupying a half an hour of time with 15-minute breaks, all in the morning between 9 and noon. Then in the afternoon, the periods are repeated, but these are not the required synchronous classes. Here's why this matters. One of the things we heard from students, particularly last spring, is that when we didn't have structure to the remote learning model, 2 teachers might ask a student to do something at the same time without knowing, either of them, that the other one had done that. Using this schedule, we're able to tell teachers, if you teach US history during first period in the school, then your synchronous class on an R day will be from 9 to 9:30. Then if you're conducting a study session for the same class, or extra help for students who need it, or conferences, individual 5-10-minute conferences for students, do it between 12:35 and 1:05, and we can guarantee that another teacher won't be asking students to do something during the same time. And you're entitled to some degree of the student's attention at that time as well. Likewise, on the work days, we would propose the same schedule, but under those asynchronous or optional conditions where if you're doing extra help, you do it with those who need it. If you're doing small group work, you do it with those who need it. If students need to get together in their own groups to do project work without a teacher, here's time that's set aside for those purposes. So we've tried to find ways to create some more structure. And again, this is kind of Jay and his team's work. I think they've done a nice job. It's a little bit, if you're not already sort of embedded in how we've been thinking about this. Maybe it's a little complex, but it really does work in a sort of simple way once you understand the system. One other thing I'll say, I'm going to go back to it for a second, is I think the fact that the R Day and the W Day follow the same schedule is extremely helpful. It's one less thing that students have to remember is a change from one day to another. It provides a little more consistency and simplicity for us. Here's my note on sports, Pam. It's only this one slide. As of right now, so I would just point out to the board that in a quote-unquote normal school year, you don't have to make a decision about whether to have interscholastic athletics or not. You do. So the only action a board would have to take would be to decide not to participate in interscholastic athletics. Our proposal is that we will. And as of right now, there's a little more detail here than there was 2 weeks ago. Summer practice guidelines were published a month or so ago. We have coaches who have been conforming with those guidelines and conducting those activities. According to the NHIAA's latest, the preseason for the fall begins September 8th, the day after Labor Day, and competition begins September 14th. You might call that tentative. I don't know, but that's the latest from the NHIAA. So to me, that's our schedule. So if there are questions about sports, we can certainly come back to it. But to me, it's pretty simple. We're having sports, and right now that's the schedule. We told you 2 weeks ago that club and activity advisors would be asked if they were interested and willing to serve in those roles and create remote possibilities. Jay can jump in. I saw a list, I think yesterday, Jay, and it looks like more than 50% of those positions are filled by the incumbent advisors who have worked with us in the past. And maybe you're still in the process of talking to people, but to whatever degree we have vacant positions for advisors, we would advertise outside of the school. To me, later there's going to be a question if I don't address it enough about social and emotional well-being. And for me, this is part of that. Part of the answer to that is giving our students things to engage in even when they're not necessarily here. Jay, do you want to add anything on that topic?
I want to go back to sports for just a moment. All of the athletic directors throughout the state, as well as the Lakes region, have been getting together and trying to create a document that all schools can abide by. And that document has a lot to do with what environments and settings are going to look like. And so right now there are a lot of ideas being tossed around, and you all as a board should certainly contribute what your thoughts and feelings are as to how Prospect should react. So for example, one of the things that's being discussed amongst ADs is whether or not to have spectators at sporting events. And if we're going to have spectators, are we going to enforce social distancing, the 6-foot rule? Are we going to enforce folks wearing masks? Are there things that we are going to enforce that perhaps other schools may not? There are some schools who are opting not to have sports. There are some schools who are opting to have sports but no spectators. There are some schools that are trying to come to a determination as to what their parameters are going to be. If they're going to have sports, maybe only the parents and immediate family are allowed to go watch. It's going to be problematic because there are going to be some schools that will allow sports to happen as normal, and they will allow spectators to come and go as they please. And then there are going to be some schools that say, sorry, no spectators. And if we end up playing those schools, it's obviously could create a problem for us as parents bring their kids to those games, but yet are not allowed to go inside or into the stands to watch. So there's a lot of things happening, a lot of conversations that are happening amongst the ADs, nothing that's been solidified yet. The NHIAA has given us the ability to play teams that we want to play who are in close proximity to Prospect. It's an open tournament this year, so you do not have to play a certain amount of games in order to qualify for the tournament. And so there's talks about some teams possibly not playing any competitive games and then just entering the tournament at the end. So there are a lot of factors, a lot of decisions that we do have to make as a school. And I would be curious as to how some of you feel regarding decisions that you hope that we make or that we should make. Should we have spectators be allowed at all of our sporting events, both inside and out?
I heard a long conversation about sports at the Concord School Board meeting last night. Very, very long. And one thing that really struck me is that all of these sort of regional clubs and teams that have been playing all summer, the private teams as well as the school practices, they really haven't had any incidents of transmission. I know that there was the one hockey incident with a player from out of state that came in that's been in the media, but that's, as far as I know, the only thing that's actually happened. So certainly and I don't know if we want to distinguish between outdoor sports and indoor sports. I just think it's an important outlet for the kids.
This is Julie. I have concerns, but I think I'm one of the more conservative in this group when it comes to COVID. So my concerns are around kids doing all the precautions during the school day and the teachers being, going through negotiations and getting kids into the building, which in my mind is the number one priority, is the learning. And obviously the social emotional health is super important, but I'm concerned about, as Jay mentioned, the schools with different parameters, and then our students who our parents may think are going to a school where it's going to be safe, and then there's people walking around and nobody's wearing masks. And so I think regardless of what the decision is made with this, that we need to be very clear about what's okay for our town and for our students and stick to it. And I obviously would vote for more precautions, and I have questions around indoor sports, especially as we get into colder weather. So I have concerns.
Is it starting to feel, Tim, like should we move this to action items? Are we expecting action tonight? Because I feel like once we go down this path, we might get away from the overall return to school.
So
topic.
I know you asked him this question. I just want to hop in. You will have another board meeting prior to the season starting. So the things that I'm more concerned about are what are going to be our in-house expectations and rules that we set forth for the visitors and spectators coming to Prospect. As I mentioned before, are we going to require that people social distance? Are we going to require that they wear masks when they're in our bleachers or standing against the fence watching soccer or sitting on the bleachers watching volleyball? Are we going to scan everybody coming into the building for a sporting event? Are we going to screen them? Those are those tiny things that we have to figure out. It doesn't have to be done tonight, but we do have to put that on the things to do list for the next board meeting. But tonight, I think the more important position that the board needs to take is, are we moving ahead with having sports, or are we not? And like Tim said earlier, if you're going to take action not to have them, otherwise, then we proceed accordingly as if we're going to have sports.
Yeah, and I agree with Jay, Pam. My answer to your question is it's on my September 1 list.
Okay.
So as of tonight, this
That
is
makes sense.
the status of sports, at least according to the NHIAA.
And I assume that you guys will bring a proposal that's more thought out and discussed with advising to us at that point to say, yes, we agree, or modify this small bit, right?
Yeah, with input from whatever the ADs are coming up with.
Yeah, and like everything else, I know
It would be
changing
different than other
everything.
regions of the state.
Yeah.
It's Eunice. I actually would support having sports, but I think that we have to think about implementing rules about wearing masks and social distancing. And that's what we have to do in our everyday life. And I think that's what we should impose.
So what I'm hearing is I haven't heard anybody yet say no to sports, so sounds like if we're in sort of agreement sports are still on, we can move on and then wait for September for the more detailed plan, if that's what I'm hearing.
I agree.
Everybody okay with that for now?
Fair enough.
Okay.
So that brings me to family choice, which when we talked about it a couple of weeks ago, we said we were going to ask the question and make the option available. And this is a round number. Jay probably knows the exact number, but about 45 of our about 445 students, families have let us know that they will elect to remain entirely remote at the beginning of the school year. So that's not insignificant. That's 20% of our population. And for anyone listening who has felt like these reentry plans are on the more conservative side, I would just point out that we're a very small school. So 20% of our students, we need to serve these students. We want everybody enrolled and engaged and participating and a part of this community. Last I heard, we've only had one withdrawal. If that's wrong, Jay, speak up anytime, but that was the last I heard. That's a good thing. So I'm pleased that, you know, these numbers are falling about where we expected, so there are no real surprises here. And those students, like I told you before, can still do some things in person if they choose to because of the social distancing rules and staying within smaller cohorts. If it works for their families, we can make it work for us. Likewise with staff, I think we've been having good success so far working on the individual cases where whether it's because of a personal medical condition or a family situation, we can keep people productively engaged doing their jobs. That's really our ideal. And so far, so good. This is new regarding the Lakes Region Technology Center. They informed us of their reopening plan days after we told you about ours. So our fingers were crossed and we weren't sure what was going to happen. They are offering in-person instruction. And Jay, you can correct me, but I think it's 90 minutes for first-year students and 180 minutes for second-year students over there. Their programs are 2-year programs.
Yeah, some of the second year 180-minute students are 5 days a week, while others remain abbreviated.
So Justin's office, the counseling office, has been working with those students. Our intention is to offer transportation. Typically, buses leave here and come back here, but if we're working with students who won't be here in the first place, we're just talking to the bus company about picking them up and taking them there. And a lot of these are older students anyway, and they'll end up providing their own transportation. So the counseling office is working through all of those issues. And again, last I heard, and I think this was this morning, Jay, I think 4 students have opted out and 36 intend to continue for this year in those programs under these conditions. So that's sort of where we are with LRTC. New background color, because now we're in Part C of the reopening plan. You already know that our bus capacities are reduced, and that's going to have an impact on the schedule. So right now we have about 90, low 90s students saying they need to take a bus. We really need those last 90 or so families' responses so that we have these numbers nailed down and we can make sure that there will not be an impact on our anticipated daily schedule. That should happen by the end of this week, ideally, but again, we need families' responses. We have found out that Convenient MD, which is the company that sponsors or authors or at least puts its name on the screening tool that we wanted to use, either has or is on the verge of having a data privacy agreement, from what we hear at least, signed, making the software legal to use with student data in New Hampshire. So we intend to use the Convenient MD screening tool. It's web-based. Staff and students will both use it. We are asking for self-reporting, which means we'll provide thermometers if we need to for anyone who needs one. And I'm sorry if that sounds silly, but we're just trying to be completely prepared for anything anybody might need. This is where I have a note to myself to bring up the temperature screeners at the entrances to the building. There were a couple of questions in the meeting and online on August 4th about the temperature screening equipment that's being set up at the entrances of some other schools. And would we consider doing that here? Some of that equipment is extraordinarily expensive. There are less costly versions. And we have a quote for 2 of those completely installed for around $8,000. I'll leave that to the board. It is not a part of this plan as of right now, so you would need to amend the plan if you want us to add those. Our proposal is for self-screening, and then if anybody shows up who has not completed the self-screening, they can't go through what we're referring to as the fast lane by showing us that confirmation page with that day's date on it. Instead, they'll have to go through another line where we will screen them. And that will include a temperature check. In order to do that, I told you on August 4th that we were going to be advertising to see if we could find an LNA or an RN or some kind of a certified nurse's assistant to support our one and only one school nurse. I was surprised, maybe I shouldn't have been. We have had tremendous response to our advertising for that. And I believe Jay and our nurse Jamie have a number of interviews scheduled. So this is on my September 1st list. I'm going to recap these items at the end of this little presentation. On my September 1st list is to bring you a nomination for that part-time assistant to support the nurse's work. Probably he or she would be doing this screening, or at least supervising it and being responsible for it. And I also will owe you a funding source for that because that's not something we budgeted last October. If any of you remember last October, none of this was on our mind. We are planning, again, you can amend this plan tonight, this is your chance. We are planning to rent 2 tents, and I'm not talking about camping tents. I mean those big, they're usually white, heavy-duty party rental tents. And I think we settled on 2, right, Jay? For the next 90 days.
Yes.
And one of them would go right in front of the building. And if somebody shows up who hasn't pre-screened, who we determine before they enter the building through our screening process that there's some suspicion or likelihood of coronavirus or of symptoms, then it would give them a place to be while awaiting transportation. In addition, under the governor's guidance, CDC guidance, we have an isolation room inside the building adjacent to the nurse's office, but that's for people who are already in, who made it through the morning screening and then they develop symptoms during the day. And in good weather, those people could even go outside to this tent. The second tent is for a different location in case of inclement weather when we're having mask breaks, because we want students to be able to go outside to take their masks off for 10 minutes with social distancing. And if it's raining, we have some space in front of the school where you first enter that's covered, and we'd have potentially these 2 tents, depending on whether there's a lot of traffic in the isolation tent. I kind of suspect it won't be very busy, but we'll have it and we'll be prepared. And again, a lot of this is about being prepared and then hopefully not needing all of these things. This is not a lot of money, and it seems to solve a number of small problems that could come up otherwise. Nothing's changed regarding face coverings. We want to mandate them in the school. And we want to start out quite tight regarding face coverings. We don't want to allow students to take them off while they're seated and distanced in the classroom, although the CDC would tell us that we can allow students to take them off while they're seated and distanced in the classroom. We want to get in here and see how it works a little bit first. We can always loosen up a little later, but it's a lot harder to tighten after starting looser. There's a little bit more of a definition here tonight of what kind of face covering is acceptable. Students are going to need to hear this from Jay. In fact, I know they already have when he did his question and answer for them a couple of weeks ago after our first presentation. We're defining a face covering that's acceptable in the building as one that conforms to the contours of the face on all sides. So a student who may want to take a triangular bandana and tie it around his nose and mouth and then let it hang down in front of his face, that's not going to do it. We all own these things now. We can provide them for anyone who needs one. It shouldn't be a big problem. There are no changes here. We've I think modified all the classrooms at this point, Jay, in terms of removing furniture. We have a storage unit that we're keeping extra desks in out back. It's very inexpensive, so that's not an issue. Like I said earlier, Justin's office in counseling was able to create cohorts where no group exceeds 10 in any class. We can provide other PPE. We are having some supplied for us. The state ordered some for us that I think we're picking up tomorrow. So we expect to have PPE for any staff who ask for it beyond their face coverings. Where am I? Air quality testing has been done. I haven't seen the results yet, so that's an update on that. Remains true though. We're a pretty new building with modern equipment that's been well maintained. I'll be very surprised if we have a problem in this regard. There's some new stuff coming regarding protocols for symptomatic students. This recommendation is the same as August 4th, which is to follow DHHS guidelines, which at the moment are one of two things. You stay home till either producing a negative COVID-19 result or both 10 days have elapsed since the onset of symptoms and 3 days have elapsed with no symptoms. So one of those two separate conditions has to be true. We would not penalize students for attendance on these days. And we also would not force staff to use accrued sick time. We would consider this administrative leave time because what we anticipate is that for many students and staff members, these are days when in a typical September or October, if you woke up with a runny nose, you'd go to work or go to school. These would not be sick days under normal circumstances. So that's how we're viewing this. We're asking people to stay home on these days because of the current situation. Also in health and safety protocols, and this is new. Last time I told you that I'd be nervous and conservative, and now I'm being more specific. If somebody in this community tests positive, of course we will do what DHHS tells us to do. Of course we will notify the community while honoring everybody's privacy, and we will consider the mode of the school. But I would also, if it happens in September, I would close the school for at least a few days so that we could see what was going on. I wouldn't go beyond that without consulting with you. I would also expect that all students and staff remained engaged in remote learning using the models that we've developed during those days, so they would still be school days. Beyond September, I think we need to wait and see what the prevailing medical advice is at that time, what the CDC and DHHS are telling us. It's different now than it was a month ago and different then than it was a month before that, and there's no reason to believe it won't be different again by October. So if you think I'm wimping out on that, I'm sorry, but it's just things have been changing too rapidly. I can tell you what I think for September, and I can commit to how I would behave with your approval in September. And beyond that, we need to see what happens. And here's that again, and I'm emphasizing it because it's a pretty significant authority that I'm suggesting you should give to me. I wouldn't do this without consulting with you. I think you know me by now. I know it's only been a year, but it has been a year. And I am not likely, I'm not inclined to make major decisions without consulting at a very bare minimum with the chair and vice chair of the board, if not with the membership. So I won't belabor the point by stating it again, but I kept it in the presentation again because I think it's important. Now we move to part D, professional learning curriculum revision. I'm really happy to say that about 3/4 of our teachers are already participating in a curriculum revision project based on the change to a 4x4 schedule and a semester-based credit model. They've jumped right in. That started, boy, over a week ago, right, Jay? There's a committee developing professional learning activities for the upcoming time we're going to have at the beginning of September. And that does include some technology tools, but one of the big focuses of that, and this goes to social and emotional learning, is working with staff on connection. And that includes, Justin's office has been developing this. It includes really specific work on what to look for, warning signs, and how to connect students with supports when teachers see things. I would remind you, and I'm going to talk more about social and emotional issues in a second, but this 4x4 schedule, in addition to managing the number of classes students have to handle at any given time, it reduces each teacher's student caseload by about half, which means teachers should have a greater opportunity to stay in touch and to nurture those personal connections. Some of the other things that they're working on have to do with essential questions and what they're calling enduring understandings, which is really, it becomes central when you have to pare down curriculum to be delivered in a shorter period of time. Teachers need some support, and we've been providing that support to focus on what are those most important things that we want to get to. Depth, when breadth is not an option, along the same lines. And then strategies for remote instruction that are not only around the technology, not only about the technology tools, but about how we construct assignments and the kinds of things we ask students to do. Here we are on social emotional learning. I think the structure of the W day, the day that sets aside 2 blocks of time for each teacher, but doesn't mandate that those are synchronous class sessions with everybody, provide built-in opportunities for those personal connections. I think with the right kind of professional development at the beginning of the year, we can expect that to be effective. And we can expect those adult and student connections to be deeper and nurtured more fully than they were in the spring. And the fact that we don't stop talking about it, and that we've been talking to teachers about it since about last May, should have a lot to do with that as well. The Making Connections training, I already told you, is being developed by the counseling staff. The other things that the counseling staff has been working on is there's a feature in Google Calendar they call appointment slots that they're trying to implement right now so that they can roll it out to students, so that students can quickly see when one of the counselors is available and just sign up for an opportunity to talk remotely. They're looking at holding hangouts for students, maybe especially the fully remote students, to come in and have some social time in groups as opposed to just with counselors, and then designing group chat opportunities on topics that normally we could just hold a meeting and have students come down to the counseling office to talk about, college application deadlines or job readiness internship possibilities or any of the kinds of things that the counseling office is doing all the time. Going into a year like this where we know that the mode is going to be different, they're developing a structure for doing those things remotely. A couple of notes on IEP and 504 services. This is one area where the federal and state governments have given us virtually no leeway. What I mean by that is, in a lot of other regulatory areas, we've had some relief and some flexibility, but when it comes to IDEA, we've had virtually none. In fact, the governor issued an executive order number 48 last spring, which actually increased the requirements of IDEA and dictated that every school in New Hampshire has to convene an IEP team meeting for every student on an IEP during the first 30 days of school this fall. That's an interesting requirement. So what we've done, and let me be really clear, by interesting, I mean, I'm not even sure that's logistically possible for most schools. But we've talked to folks at the Department of Education, and it is acceptable in their interpretation of that executive order for us to contact families, which we've done, and ask, do you want to have this meeting in the next 30 days? Or would you like to defer until we've seen several weeks of school, gauged how things are going for your student, and then have the meeting a little bit later? If the families agree to that, we can do it. So that's been our strategy, and I think that's what most schools are doing in this regard right now. And then some of our students who require the highest levels of intervention, I believe it is likely we will invite to be here with both cohorts A and B. That won't have a huge impact on our numbers in the building. We'll still be able to provide appropriate social distancing and all the other precautions. But I think there are certain students who it's just so challenging to provide remote services that we're better off doing things in person if we possibly can. There are no real changes with regards to things like band and chorus and woodshop. Those are conversations we're still sort of at the beginning of. We want to talk about it, but we've got so many more pressing things that we're just not there. Unless, Jay, you've made progress on some of those things that I'm not aware of yet. I think that still is in front of us.
We have not made as much progress.
Yeah. We've been busy. It's okay. And then with regards to teachers who might be unable to be here but are still available to perform the essential responsibilities of their jobs, I've submitted a description of what facilitating those classrooms would look like to the Paraprofessionals Association for them to review. And my first impression, I'll be following up more with the members of the board's negotiation committee. But my first impression is that that's been a very positive conversation. So I think that's likely to go well. And what I mean by that is if we have a teacher who, for some reason that we won't talk about publicly, out of respect for their confidentiality, just can't work within the building at the moment, but can work and is highly qualified to do, I mean, I would argue that a professional educator is who we want teaching our kids. So having a teacher engaged using Google Meet with a classroom full of kids who are here can work, but we still need an adult in that room. So that's what I'm talking about when I refer to a classroom facilitator, which is a new and different kind of a description of a job than we've ever had. But again, I think we can accommodate that. I made an appeal to families on the 4th of August to please don't just ask your children to follow the rules here at the school. Please observe social distancing in your daily lives. Wear a mask. If we can prevent community spread in Belknap County, and particularly in Alton and Barnstead, then we're going to keep this school open. And likewise, if we do all the right things in this school, but there is community spread in these communities, then we're going to end up with a problem in the school, and it could shut us down. So this is really a community project more so than a school project, and the more cooperation we can have from the entire Alton and Barnstead communities, the better off we'll all be. Same with staff, and they already know this. Jay and I have had some meetings with teachers, and that brings us to what next steps would be after tonight, would be to continue public communication about our plans. Jay has a couple of letters ready to go out to families. We've already told you a couple of times, we're still looking for about 90 responses. We have memorandums of agreement with labor associations to talk about, but I think your negotiations committee is already in pretty good shape with some of that. On your agenda tonight, Jay has some changes to the student handbook to talk about. Schedules for students are ready to go. There are likely to be some ad drops afterwards, but now it's August 18th. We actually have a couple of weeks to do that stuff. Teachers are already working on curriculum revision, and we have some time built into this schedule in September to complete that. Professional development planning is already underway. We have a couple of weeks to finish that. On my September 1st list would be talking about policy ramifications of some of these things, but that's a September 1st problem, not a tonight problem. And I'm not going to read my list of acknowledgements to you. It's on Facebook. It'll be on the school's website tomorrow. Thanks to everybody who's helped us with this entire process. My list, my summary at the end of all this. What are the big changes and developments? Well, we've added structure to what the 2 remote days look like. What is a remote instructional day? What is a remote work day? We've defined that better so that students and teachers can understand that, and Jay can talk to everybody about expectations. The next thing that's new tonight is my suggestion that you empower me to close the school if necessary in an emergency, but not for more than 5 days without coming back to you. The next item that I need your feedback on is this idea of buying a couple of temperature scanners that would scan people's temperatures as they walk through the doors. We have a plan for self-reporting and a plan to conduct screening here at the school for people who don't do that, but we can certainly add that technology if you want us to. For September 1st, I anticipate bringing you a nomination for a nurse's assistant, probably on a part-time basis. And because that wasn't in the budget, I need to bring you a funding source for that at the same time. I'll do that September 1st. We are short paraprofessionals right now. You will actually probably accept a couple of resignations later in this meeting. So we have at least 3 open positions. We may have as many as 5 as Sharon Stewart works through assignments with Jay and case managers for the year. So we have an ad out and we're looking for people to work in those roles. Bus schedules remain a little bit up in the air right now, as I've told you. We need to procure, configure, and train both faculty, staff, and students' families on using the Convenient MD screening tool. And then we have a conversation about sports to have on September 1st when we have more information about sports. But like everything else, it's changing week by week. So
Sounds good.
Suggest that we wait 2 weeks for that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That's a really comprehensive plan. I think looking at our action items, I think I'd like to separate and make sure that we delineate the authorization to close school as a separate action item so that it reflects as such in the minutes. Would
All right,
anybody
so-
like to make a motion?
Sure, I'll make a motion, Jason, make a motion to accept the plan as presented by the superintendent minus the authorization for closing of school.
Second that.
Okay. Any discussion?
Tim, when you say close the school, are you talking about just shutting down completely, so not going to remote days? Is that what you're talking about? There's a health concern? Just a little clarification. Does it mean
Yeah.
it's closed, period?
You know, I'm really glad you asked that question, Julie, because my intention after the first day of school is not to miss a day of structured learning this year. In my mind, we've built a system that allows us to pivot into remote learning. So let's use it if we need to.
That's what I understood. So I was curious about the need to close. I'm assuming it has to do with a sanitization, someone's sick, teachers can't work. Something extreme is what you're saying this is for. Am I accurate?
Yeah, absolutely, Julie. And again, thank you for asking, because I'll want the minutes to reflect this also. I'm talking about if there's a positive case in the community. Everybody wants the answer to that question right now. I don't care what school system you're talking about or whether you're talking to teachers or administrators or whatever. Everybody wants to know, what are you going to do if there's a positive case among your staff or students? And my answer is that if that happens during the month of September, as all of us are just getting back into our buildings, I will put the school into remote learning mode and have everybody stay home for at least 5 days, and then come to you if any more is required, just to give us time to breathe and see how it goes. Allow DHHS to get involved and do their thing, allow us to clean the building. And again, to me, Julie, let's take the conservative approach for the first month and hope that puts us in a position to be really successful in the long term, which means getting everybody in here.
So Tim, I really appreciate it. I felt like your plan was really thorough and it does allow for being seamlessly switching from one to the other. And if your intention is just to be able to go straight into remote, I'm not sure if that requires a vote, because that's what the plan brings forward. You know, if you're actually closing the school, like if you're saying no one's working, no one's learning, something's gone down in the community, we got to close down, then that's what I see is actually closing school based on your thorough plan. So,
Gotcha.
alas, that's my understanding.
Gotcha. So we are on the same page.
We are on the same page. Great job. I just don't know if you need to be able to close the school.
Close the school building.
Well, but I think there is 2 separate things, because what happens if he actually has to, I don't know, a bunch of people get sick, he's got to make a judgment call that may have to just shut down. So I think 2 motions, we can, you know, you're adopting this plan, you can put a second motion about actually closing or go to remote learning, you can put that in that second motion, a little authority on that.
I think
leverage.
that's great. So I would like to modify the motion to say, instead of closing the school, switching from in-person to remote.
But we haven't voted on the first approving a plan yet.
Well, we're approving the plan first.
Sorry,
right?
no, I'm talking about the,
We have a motion on the floor about authorizing Tim to close school.
No, we have I think that's on the floor right now is a motion to accept the plan minus the authorization.
Oh, okay. I guess I couldn't hear you. Okay.
okay,
Because you wanted that as a separate motion, Pam, so I eliminated that from the first motion. It is strictly about approving this plan minus that one piece.
Okay. I heard you wrong.
Pam, your meeting. Tell us what to do.
So we have a motion on the floor about accepting the plan overall. So let's focus on that for a minute. And we have a second. So any discussion on that particular motion?
So I have some questions about the work days, the W days, and it revolves around how optional they are. I guess my concern is, and I just want to get more feedback from Jay and Tim on this. You know, if we're down to 4 subjects and we're looking for those to be more in depth, and in fact more rigorous, I would assume, but a significant part of the week is optional attendance. I guess I'm concerned about how we're accomplishing that, and especially in the beginning when there are 3 work days and for the first couple of weeks where really we're getting those subjects started in new classes. How are we going to keep kids engaged, especially those who are not necessarily self-driven learners? I'm just concerned about kids falling through the cracks with so much open on those work days as far as attendance.
I have the same concern, Karen, because you really look at, each of my kids will be in school 2 days in the month of September. And I assume that was an agreement with the teachers. That's my assumption. Is it was no?
Yeah, so I think there were a couple of questions in the early July survey of parents regarding improvements to remote instruction that drove a lot of that scheduling. And so one of those was parents actually almost overwhelmingly preferred the idea of students taking 4 classes at a time as opposed to 6 or 7. And the I guess I'd call it a plurality of parents, because I think the options we gave were mandatory attendance 1 or 2 days a week, 3 days a week, or 4 or 5 days a week, I think was how we broke it down. And that middle option was by far the most popular option among parents, which I put a lot of weight in simply because parents are the ones who watched their students in the spring without a lot of structure, where everything was asynchronous. I've also been in a number of meetings with a lot of superintendents talking about if you're remote, replicating the school day, as if that's somehow a good idea. And I will give you my personal opinion. I think that's not a good idea. From 8 a.m. until 3 p.m. on a computer, period to period, isn't what any of us want to do, least of all a teenager. And I think that, Karen, you make a great point, and we're certainly nervous about it.
Yeah. I guess I'm just wondering if there's a way to build some kind of accountability in perhaps requiring a certain number of check-ins with teachers or small group meetings. So there's some accountability on those days. And I guess I wonder also in that question on the survey, was that in the context for parents viewing those days if it was full remote learning or whether it was blended? Because I think maybe that might be a little bit different.
Yeah, in the event of future remote learning.
So there are 2 questions that I heard there, Karen. The first is about that transition back to school. and the progress that we'll make coming back. It is a slow start. It is a slow start. No, please. Sorry. It is a slow start, and I think that was designed for a specific reason. And cases can be made on both ends as to why that might be a good decision or a bad decision. I think once we hit September 28th and students are in school for 2 days a week and online 1 day a week, it's really going to come down to the type of instruction that teachers are providing. And the hope is that they're doing all of this upfront work to develop lessons and activities that do keep kids engaged even on the off days. Now, that's not to say that that's going to happen for every teacher and certainly not going to happen for every student. But I would also make the argument that that doesn't happen when we're in school for 7 hours a day, 5 days a week. There are some kids who just figure out corners to cut. And sadly, there are teachers who figure out corners to cut as well. But those are in few numbers. But at the end of the day, it's going to come down to the type of assignments, the type of instruction that teachers are giving. And is it going to be enough to sustain kids on the days that they're not in school? But we cannot take the old school model and apply it to this. And that, I taught a math lesson today, so I want you to go home and practice 15 problems and I'll see you 2 days from now. It can't be like that. There has to be some level, some deeper understanding that has to take place in the activities that are being given to reinforce the instruction that was provided.
If I'm teaching in this model, Karen, I think that my students are likely to have to meet in groups to do work together during those assigned times on the alternate days, the W days, and I might drop in on the different groups and just say, hey, how's it going? And I think that a lot of the kinds of things we talk about trying to do in our public schools, in a way, it's almost easier to achieve under these circumstances because we have to do it differently. I can't just get up and give a lecture and fill the time being the sage on the stage who is supposed to be the expert in my subject and assuming the students don't know anything and telling them the information. It just won't work in this mode. We have to get better. And this is going to be true all over the country right now. We have to get better at helping students take initiative and then finding ways to hold them accountable without being next to them all the time.
I completely agree with that. I'm just concerned that there's an awful lot of leeway for corner cutting and that we aren't requiring any kind of attendance to some of those small groups that will actually provide those social and emotional connections. We're saying that's important, but then we're making it completely optional on those days. I guess that's my main concern on that, and also that that we might lose some kids because there's not enough structure on those days.
I think the experience that we faced in the spring, we didn't have much structure. We didn't have any classes that had to meet online synchronously. We didn't use attendance. This go around, we're readjusting, and we are, attendance is going to be required. Students could potentially fail with an attendance failure if they're absent and not communicating with the school. I think that because none of us have experienced this before, we don't know necessarily how it's going to go. We may find a month into school that your point is exactly right. We've disengaged some when we thought we were going to be able to engage, and I don't think anyone that I'm associating with, whether it's teacher or administrator, has what the right answer is here. We're all kind of shooting into the dark here, hoping for the best, and I'm putting a lot of faith in our staff, our faculty and staff, as well as the kids. I mean, they want to be back in school. And so my expectation is that everybody's going to be doing what they need to be doing to have success. It's about as much as we can hope for at this point. But
Oh yeah, I see all that, and that's why I'm asking questions and trying to, get some discussion around this. I mean, I guess what I'd like to consider is, at least give the teachers some kind of authority to require attendance at small group meetings that are integral to the class. Especially maybe as an introduction during those first couple of weeks, because you're going to have kids who are going to have 3 days a week that are essentially free. And I mean, I think the teachers are going to struggle and have to spend a lot of time to maybe gather those small groups in a regular way. I mean, I'd like to see the teachers have some authority to require attendance, once a month in a small group meeting, something that gives them more accountability and attendance, so they're not just chasing kids.
Yeah, the other approach that we're taking this year that is going to be different than the spring, and we've had time to think about and prepare and understand that it's the right thing to do, is spending more time up front engaging kids right away, rather than on day one saying, "Hey, take out your textbook, let's get to work." I really envision those first couple of weeks, those first 2 or 3, 4 classes, really being about establishing a routine and establishing communication and engagement with the kids. It's just like regular teaching. If you get students buying into you as an individual and respecting you as an individual, they're going to step up to the plate and do their work, not because they're super excited about Algebra 2, but because they have a respect for the person teaching it and they don't want to let that person down. So we're gonna come in pretty heavy in the very beginning to make sure that we're establishing those relationships and expectations.
Jay, are the semesters going to be adjusted to account for this really slow start?
Yeah, once tonight is over and we have approval on our start days, we'll be able to then count the 45 days and readjust the calendar backwards. So the calendar as it stands right now, that's on the website, it absolutely needs to be adjusted to.
I don't mean the September 8th start. I mean the fact that there's going to be such a slow start during the whole first month of school. So it seems like there would be a disparity between semester 2 and the amount of time for instruction versus semester 1, because you're basically spending the whole month in transition.
Well, what we do typically is we look at the 180-day calendar and then we count 90 days backwards from the end or 90 days forward from the beginning. And we'll ultimately do the same thing. We'll decide what our start date is going to be. And because we're going to have the AB days, I mean, I eyeballed the calendar a few days ago and looked at the how many days the A kids will be in class, how many days that the B kids will be in class, and I think as it stands right now, there's a teacher workshop day in October that gives the A kids a 1-day advantage, if I remember correctly. But again, we can control that by simply saying, all right, next Monday is going to be a double. It's going to be a B day twice. Not saying that we will, but we can control what the days are going to be. And we'll have to obviously readjust the calendar.
Okay.
The only thing I'd also add, Karen, about, because we've been all around on what to require attendance at and how to weigh those requirements, is in the spring, so there was a sense here, at least we thought that we started out pretty well when we first went to emergency remote learning, but that it suffered over time. And once students saw a reason to disengage, students tended to become disengaged. And again, Jay could jump in, but I think I've got that about right, that over time it just got harder. And I think one of the concerns we've heard and that we've considered is if showing up for a synchronous meeting online, as opposed to doing the work and showing mastery or understanding, counts for a lot of a grade. Once a student has missed a few of those synchronous requirements and starts to understand that grade is slipping away, we have some concern that they just become disengaged, that students might give up. So we really want to, and again, it's a horrible balancing act that we're trying here. But I think we want to try to keep the focus on mastery and understand those enduring understandings of the essential questions as much as we can, as opposed to compliance activities. But we're dealing with teenagers and we need a certain amount of compliance in order to even have them here in the first place. So here we are. Welcome to our world.
Yeah, and I guess my concern is I'd prefer teachers to spend their time engaging kids and teaching and going to the depth we want to see in courses rather than worrying about whether there's participation on 3 days of the week and needing to chase kids who are not engaged at all. I guess I'm concerned that teachers aren't going to have a way to get the kids who are hard to engage at small group meetings or activities on those days. And it will be a challenge for them. So I guess my follow-up question is, if we are in a blended mode for some time, at what point are we going to have a checkpoint where we say, okay, is this process of having days that are more fluid and more optional, are we hitting the marks we need to with, assignments passed in and progress in the class? How do we do that as a checkpoint with measurable criteria, not that, oh, we feel it's going well and, oh, for this percent it's okay. What will the criteria be and when will that checkpoint be to really make sure that we do have the engagement?
Well, Karen, we have a lot of things that are in place throughout the year under regular circumstances. That's constantly under surveillance between what the teachers are doing, what the counselors are doing, what the intervention team and administration is doing. Those things are always in place. However, just because those measures are there does not equate to success. There are some times that we know long in advance a student is going to fail or is not having success. And we make sure that all necessary parties are on the same page, that being student and parent as well. So this situation is no different. We're going to continue on a weekly basis to be monitoring things like that. And if Tim is slipping through the cracks, Tim is going to know it from a variety of sources, and Tim's parents are going to know it from a variety of sources. So I think it's going to be as good as it is under normal circumstances. But by no means is it going to be perfect. Never is.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Any other discussion? Questions from the board? You guys good? Okay. So let's do a vote by roll call on the remote learning plan. Julie?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Eunice?
Yes.
Everett?
Yes.
Lila?
Yes.
Jason?
Yes.
Eliza?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm a yes, unanimous. So the next motion, I think we'll be looking at authorizing the superintendent to close the school building and move into remote learning.
I make a motion to authorize the superintendent to pivot into straight up remote learning for up to 5 days as needed. And if he needs to go beyond that, we'll have to work with the board, and also like to add in there, if he does do that in 5 days, that the chair and vice chair are notified.
Second?
Yeah, second.
Okay, thank you. Further discussion on this?
I'm good. Thanks for the clarification.
Thanks, Julie. All right.
Yes.
Okay. Roll call vote. I think I heard Julie say yes. Karen, do you have a question, or is that you waiting for your yes?
I'm waiting to say yes.
Okay. Yes. Karen's yes. Eunice?
Yes.
Everett?
Yes.
Lila?
Yes.
Jason?
Yes.
Eliza?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. So that motion passes unanimously. And then I think we needed I don't know if anybody wants to make a motion on this regarding the temperature screening units. It's not in place right now, but if a board member wanted to make a motion, I think that we could entertain it.
I would like to make a motion to entertain purchasing the screeners so that we have more consistency between the two Alton schools at minimum.
I'll second for discussion, Jason.
Okay, discussion.
One, I want to know where we would get the money. Do we have the money somewhere? Obviously, that's important. Yeah, I know. So it is. And two, I am still, depending on what the screeners are, like I'm looking at one on Thursday morning for my facility. I still have concerns if they're going to use facial recognition because there's still lawsuits out there on that. And these technologies that are out there are still very new in some places and haven't vetted out quite yet. So I do have some concerns about just jumping on board right away. I mean, me personally, I like to see how ACS works when they open up school, if it's working, not working, before we just purchase something. And that's just speaking for me.
Yeah, and not only that, but temperature scanning is only one part of your screening. There are questions and things, so I feel like that's the input. We're still gonna have to, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, I don't know what the questions are on that particular app, but it seems like you're gonna have to do that anyway. And I think we can better spend $8,000.
So
And we are not doing this in one thing.
we've begun researching the different brands that we could go with. Andy has he has weekly meetings with facility directors from throughout the state, and we've gotten leads as well as to some of the things that have been installed in various places and the various mechanisms and technologies. An interesting part of this is that I think it's offering people a sense of security to have this additional layer. However, some of the medical personnel that we have spoken to have also said the temperature taking is not proving to be a surefire way to assess whether somebody is symptomatic or not. They could ride in a hot car on a 100-degree day and get out of the car and have over 100-degree temperature. The inaccuracies from thermometers, especially the temporal ones where they're external, are not nearly as accurate as thermometers that are being used internally. So there's certainly a lot of questionability of or reliability of some of these devices. So I think even in terms of your vote tonight, we still have research to do. So it sounds like the vote that you take tonight should be to authorize Tim to do it if that ends up being the direction that we ultimately want to go. But I don't think at this point we're 100% sold that it is the direction to go. For what it's worth.
I would offer that maybe not. I mean, it might be the midday checks that it might be valuable if they work well. Maybe catching the kids as they're walking through a certain area of the building or something like that. But I do think there's value in waiting to see how well they work for other schools. Balanced with availability. I don't know if they're still if they're going to be available in a month or not.
Yeah, they are.
Okay.
They're available. These companies are pushing them out there. That's my concern. I've got 4 or 5 companies calling me on a regular basis. Some as close as Rochester.
Yeah.
And I still don't think they're quite vetted out yet is one issue. 2, we can still look into things like Gopher Fund and other things that might reimburse us for buying those, which is what I would look at if I was doing my jail. But I like the idea, like Jay said, authorizing the superintendent to continue researching it, including funding options. I don't think we should just take it off the table. I think it just needs to be researched and vetted out. And I always love when other places do that for you. Let's see if it's really working where we spend our money.
I agree. I also think that it's going to be good to see how the plan works and how the reporting works when you kick off your opening plan, because that's going to be very telling.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if we made temperature taking just like brushing teeth as your morning routine and some sort of, descriptive that we send to parents, maybe it can become a habit. But I know that I still have to hound my children who are teenagers to brush their teeth. So I am just wondering about the temperature taking.
They're going to do it in the car, Julie, right before they get out to go to
right
school.
before they get out.
You.
Yeah, I'm sure.
They're going to be there on their app. Oh, crap. I forgot to take my... Yeah.
So that's I would like to support further investigation and of course budgeting from Gopher funding or wherever it's come if it's possible. I think
Are you amending
more
your
is better right now. More is better.
Julie, are you amending your motion?
I am seconding your awesome motion.
No, did you make the motion?
You made... Yeah.
Julie,
Julia,
you made
I
the
think
motion,
I thought that you made the motion that was very clearly stated. I made the motion to discuss. You made the motion to have the superintendent investigate.
I'll do it. We just need a consensus anyways to have them continue to investigate. It's not really making any decisions.
Yeah, let's go with that motion. Sounds like Julie is, yeah. There. Okay.
All right.
I like to keep you on your toes, everybody.
All right. Let's do a roll call on that. Are we finished with discussion? Does anybody else have anything else for that?
Pam, I think we took the motion off the floor. It's just a consensus.
Okay.
If you're okay with that.
I'm fine with that.
Perfect.
Okay. All right. I think that covers our remote learning topic. Yes? Did I miss anything, Tim?
Oh, no. You got it all. Sorry,
All right.
everybody.
The next item is changes to the student handbook.
In your packet.
I would like to make a motion to accept the changes proposed in the student handbook.
Second for discussion.
And I'm just wondering, because most people are listening on the phone. There's quite a few there. I guess it might be a lot to summarize verbally.
I think, Pam, if I may,
Mm-hmm.
I think we could highlight the things that are probably most notable. I mean, things like update the calendar, update the letter, those happen every year.
Yeah, thank you.
There are notable things here that relate to the structure of the year, hybrid learning and potentially remote learning, that I think Jay could probably talk about for a minute.
I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
So one of the things that we're trying to do here is trying to keep as much consistency from last year to this year. However, there are certain things that definitely need to be modified. At the end of the day, what we're trying to do here is lead with safety first. And so there are a couple of significant changes that will take place in this. However, in some cases, it's just a revamping of a sentence or adding a sentence or two. At the end of the day, we're going to have to do a pretty good marketing campaign. And this is part of what I've been drafting to parents to let them know of these important changes. So, for example, item number 4, which is arriving at school. In years past, we allowed students to get dropped off at school in between 7 and 7:15. Now, if school doesn't start until 9 o'clock this year, that's a change that's going to take place. And I'll work with Tim and Andy to decide what's going to be the best day or best time to open up school each day. Also, with the attendance, going back to item number 3, my recommendation is to keep the attendance policy the same. Clearly, kids have less time that they have to be in school. That's the A days, B days, and the R days. And so we think that continuing with the for and excused absence policy makes sense, knowing full well that absences are going to be more so this year than they've previously been, especially if parents are doing the right thing of keeping their kids out when they're suspicious of illness. we're really going to encourage parents to communicate with us. Myself in the school, or the attendance secretary, who is a direct liaison for me, as well as the nurse, to let both of them know why a student's going to be out. And this is consistent with how attendance is done normally as well. If we're getting good correspondence and communication with parents, we excuse days as we see fit. And there are some families, some students who are chronically absent, whose parents make no attempt to reach out to us. We make multiple attempts to reach out to them, and sometimes to no avail. And those are often the times the kids who receive attendance failure. So there's not much changing there. Another big thing will be going back to number 4, arriving at school. This is going to be a matter that comes up several times throughout the day, and that is, where can kids congregate in smaller groups? In years past, most kids would get to school in the morning. They either hang out in the cafeteria or they do laps around the first floor of the building. So this year, the cafeteria can certainly be used as an area to congregate, but walking around the building seems like it's going to be something that's going to be not allowed this year, because we just don't have the eyes to be looking everywhere. And we know that there's going to be some attempts to be walking around sharing headphones and holding hands and what have you. So we want to find specific areas that kids can go to congregate with each other prior to school starting, as well as throughout the day when there are mask breaks and we're forced to be inside. So we are figuring out what those areas are going to look like, and what the capacity is going to be in those areas, and how they're going to be supervised. One of the big changes is number 5. This is the alcohol and drug policy. We currently have a policy on the book that students on their first and oftentimes second attempt get a 10-day in-school suspension. We'd like to move that to a 10-day out-of-school suspension, and the reason being is that, whether it's vaping or whether it's drugs or alcohol, these are things that are can significantly have a negative impact on the larger community. And I'm fearful that unless we have a pretty tough line, that kids may be tempted to push the envelopes on that one. And I would really hope that, they can withhold from bringing whatever illegal substances they want to bring to school, or that they cannot do it for the 2 days that we're asking them to be there. And anyone who is going to violate that is really not taking everyone's safety into account. So my recommendation is that alcohol, drugs, as well as anything related to smoking and vaping, those students will receive a 10-day out-of-school suspension. Now, keeping in mind that 10 days is 2 weeks. Out of those 2 weeks, it's 4 days that they would miss of instruction. And we would expect them to still attend school on the Wednesday synchronous meeting. Everything else there, number 9, I suppose, is a significant thing, that by approving this change, you're also making a change to the graduation requirements. But we would, Justin and I have talked a lot about this, and we think that our best course of action this year is to temporarily suspend community service requirements, and as things seem to get better, when they get better, that we can lift the restrictions of that. But we also like to take this time to reassess whether or not having a community service graduation requirement is right for our students. And what I mean by that is, right now we're pretty much forcing every student to do community service, and it actually lessens the value for community service. I think a lot of kids end up fudging some numbers in some services that they've done. And I think for kids who are applying off to college, that is something that is specifically asked in their application of, have you completed community service? And so for some kids who have completed community service, they lose out on that ability to say, yes, I have, because it's a graduation requirement. So even though they've done community service, their hand was forced to do it, and it doesn't necessarily give them the accolade that they might get a college looking at their application, if that makes sense. So while we're in this temporary hold on community service, we'd like to go back and reevaluate the program and perhaps create some other distinction when they graduate to maybe recognize them in some other way that they've completed a certain amount of community service hours. Moving on to the second page, we've had a couple of changes regarding how we're issuing discipline. We're going to move away from after-school detentions. That includes teacher detentions, and we're going to utilize lunch detentions in lieu of after-school detentions and teacher detentions. And a lunch detention consists of a student having lunch in the intervention room where they're not able to socialize with friends. We also are looking at having another disciplinary consequence in which we do not allow students to go outside during a mandatory mask break. Again, removing the socialization aspect as the consequence. That they would have another place to go that is supervised by an adult where they would be able to take their mask break outside, but not be around peers. Dress code, I think as it's written now, it works. We are going to have to be a little bit, I think, more forgiving. We may have students who choose to wear goggles throughout the day who don't ordinarily wear glasses. We may have students who have hats that have face shields attached to it. And I think we're just going to have to be a little bit more lax on dress codes, specifically hats and headgear that they may not normally wear.
AJ?
Yes.
Question on that? That
Yep.
has come up in other places. What about adding a phrase in there that they need proper dress code when they're at remote learning? Like at home, like a pajama top or other things that probably are inappropriate there on a Zoom meeting. It might want some language in there saying that they need to be properly dressed because they're still part of the school day, and just something to think about. I run into my own kid.
Okay.
just saying.
Okay.
Well, while you're writing, the other thing was, at the last meeting, Tim said there was going to be zero tolerance policy on mask wearing, so should that be included as well?
So that's the other component that is going to have to be included into the section about dress code. We are going to have to describe not only that masks are mandatory, but we're going to have to get into the caliber, quality of masks. Bandanas are not going to be allowed. I forget the ones that you pull up from the neck, but those are not going to be allowed either. And that we're going to specify that they need to be proper masks, preferably, and we won't put this in the rule, but they have to be the right quality and the right kind of face mask to wear. So yes, that was what I mean by the verbiage regarding masks and what is adequate and what is not. Item number 13, which is something that, again, plays a little bit of a role regarding the calendars. We currently use up a lot of time for midterm exams and final exams. It seems to make the most amount of sense for this year to eliminate exams. What that will do is change the percentage of the value of each quarter in each semester. In a full year course, in a 1-credit course, a midterm exam is worth 10% of their final grade, and a midterm exam is worth 10% of their final grade. In a half-credit course, the final exam is worth 20% of their final grade. So I think with how curriculum is being reorganized, I think the time that we don't have with kids that we normally have, and in addition to just the calendar being different this year, my recommendation is that we do eliminate midterm and final exams. And if teachers choose to give some type of concluding summative assessment, that they would just incorporate that into the grade book as a normal test. And that would make, each quarter of a full year course worth 50% each. Another thing, item number 14, Our intention is to not use lockers this year, with the exception of a few special education students who will need access to a locker. Same thing with locker rooms. Our plan is to keep the locker rooms closed and not have accessibility inside there either. Item number 15 with senior privileges. This has always been something that seniors have looked forward to. If they meet certain requirements, they are able to arrive to school late and leave early as long as they do not have an academic class. This year, my recommendation is to forego senior privileges and really affording that opportunity to anyone in the building. I think if a freshman in particular has transportation to get to and from school where they don't have to stay or arrive for a study hall, I think we should allow that option. And again, number 16 is very similar. It mimics what I proposed earlier regarding alcohol and drugs.
And I would just add and submit that in my conversation with Jay about this, particularly when it comes to things like vaping, that's a whole different offense this year than it's ever been in the past. You know, vaping obviously is a health issue for the student. Vaping, maybe for those nearby, but in an age when what's our central concern here, reopening the school, it's droplet control and what might be in the droplets coming out of somebody's nose and mouth. A student who's vaping is really doing one of the most dangerous things that could possibly be done in this building. And we should have absolutely no patience for that.
All right. Thank you. I can't remember if we have a motion on the floor.
Yep.
Okay.
I'd like to amend my motion though.
Okay.
I'd like to amend my motion to have these policies moved to the policy committee to accept, this board authorizing them to accept it as they do a final approval, and then we'll ratify it at the September meeting.
Okay. That sounds good.
Is there a second?
Yes, second.
All right. Julie,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Eunice,
Yes.
Everett,
Yes.
Lila,
Yes.
Jason,
Yes.
Eliza,
Yes.
Brandy. Did Brandy leave us? I don't see her. Okay, I think Brandy's dropped off, and I'm a yes. Okay.
I have one question, Pam. Jay, are we tying your hands on any of the information you need to get out to parents in the letter by not approving these?
A little bit. And I was just going to ask that question is, do we have to wait for the policy committee to ratify these policy changes before they can be put into the handbook?
The motion was just for them to look it over and then say just kind of yes, and we'll ratify it in September.
So they can see the final language.
So I can see your final language. The board doesn't need to see it, just the policy for people that they say good enough to go, and we're saying we'll take their word for it, but we'll ratify it in September. Because that was my intent on the motion.
So to answer your question, Karen, then yes, we unless you're giving me the authorization to make these changes tonight, I will not be able to communicate out to parents prior to September 1st, which is what I was hoping to do.
I would rather err on the side of communication myself, honestly.
I don't know what's hampering anything except for just saying, just write up what you got, what you think you need, give it to the policy first people, which is, who's on the policy committee? Brandy
Yes.
and
I believe I am.
Julie. If you just send it out to them and they say good to go, then you just send it. We're just gonna ratify it in September later, that's all. Does that make sense?
So
Without a meeting?
Right. Just so somebody has a set of eyes on, because you said they're gonna have masks and other things there, just so they get a chance to quickly look at it. We put them on a policy committee, So we're saying we, just, they agree with Jake puts together, just good to go. Or vote it down.
Does the policy committee usually review the handbooks? I guess that's one of the distinctions in my mind.
No, they don't. But this year, because some of the changes in the handbook do relate directly to policy changes.
Okay. So it's funny. So my intention was, when we talked about committee meetings prior to September 1st, was to ask for the policy subcommittee to get together, because once the board has approved these changes to the handbook, the policy subcommittee would then need to recommend 1-year amendments to probably, oh boy, it could be a dozen or more different policies. And just for one example, you actually have this business about 10% of a year's grade being derived from the midterm and 10% coming from the final exam. I believe that's actually in a board policy, right, Jay?
Yes.
So my thinking was that after you approve the changes to the handbook, we would compile a list of the policies that were affected and ask the policy subcommittee to look at those, and then come to the board and say, we like your handbook, now vote to modify these policies for 1 year only.
That makes a lot of sense. And I've been in Jay's position many times, and it's hard when you're waiting for a decision before you can communicate, and communication. I was up till midnight in a board meeting last night. Communication is so critical, especially this year. I'm just wondering if we want to revisit this vote.
So I'd like to make a motion that due to the need for timely communication to students and families regarding changes to the student handbook, that we allow Jay to communicate the changes in his letters as reflected on this document, to be followed up by review by the policy committee in relation to the actual policies. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Second.
Well,
All right.
technically speaking, you need to vote on the first motion first.
We already voted on it, didn't we?
No.
No, I haven't voted on the first motion yet. So in that case, if that's the will of the board, I will retract my initial motion. I don't know who seconded it, if you
I
want.
did, yes, I'm fine with that.
And Lila's retracting hers, so that way the only motion on the floor is Karen's.
Further discussion? Are we good? All right. Julie?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
I think we lost Eunice. Everett?
Yes.
Lila?
Yes.
Jason?
Yeah.
Eliza?
Yes.
And Brandy's back.
Yes.
Okay. And I'm a yes as well.
Thank you for that. It's going to be helpful.
Anything for you, Jay?
All right. Scrolling back to the agenda. One sec.
I missed in-person meetings.
Food price increase.
So currently, our lunch price is $3. After completing the required paid lunch equity tool, we found that we need to increase it to at least $3.09. However, Andrew is requesting we increase it to $3.25, just making it easier for students and employees to not deal with pennies. And it will help over the next couple of years. We won't have to have another price increase. So we're recommending the school board increase the lunch price from $3 to $3.25.
Make a motion that we approve the increase of school lunches to $3.25.
I'll second it. Jason?
I have some concerns about whether this is the right time to raise lunch prices. I know it seems small, but even like $3.10. I mean, this is a time when many people are losing their jobs and struggling financially.
I'd like to move that we amend the motion to $3.10.
I second that. I'm
Thanks,
concerned.
Julie.
I'm also concerned about raising when everybody's worried about money. And additionally, I don't know what services are happening right now with the few days the kids are in school. But I don't know what the meal plan is. And so I don't want to dive into that. I'm sure that it's being asked for a reason. So I think 310 is a reasonable way to go.
Was there a motion and second?
Jay said there's also a coin shortage.
Yeah.
Just a suggestion I've seen from other districts is my school bucks has the prepayment for families, but some districts are waiving the district fees so that they're encouraging families to pay online without incurring that fee. That might cost Prospect more, but is that something we could at least look into, Tim?
We can.
So
Heidi,
we're
do you already know anything about that off the top of your head?
Waiving the fee, it would just be the district would be picking up the extra fee that the parents pay currently. We'd have to figure out the dollars.
Yeah.
It would definitely affect the district.
It's a buck or two every time I load money in there.
Sorry, I can't hear you very well, Lila.
But when I put money in my school bucks, I can't remember exactly, but it's over $1. Well, probably less than $2.
I think it's like $2.50 or $2.75, something like $2.50 maybe.
Maybe, I can't remember.
Because they definitely, it's better to deposit more money rather than more frequently.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Yes.
I believe ACS reached an agreement with school bucks that that fee is actually going to get credited back as towards meals. I don't know if that was specifically negotiated or if that's something school bucks is offering across the board.
That might have been during the emergency period, because I know that it covers the credit card fees.
Yeah, but I think that's in the plan going forward too.
Okay. So something to look into.
Yep, we can look into it.
Okay.
And I know in Barnstead, our social worker has been very active in reaching out to families who in the past have not applied for free and reduced meals. So this may be a time to kind of pursue that. People are to apply or just don't know that they qualify.
Yep.
Yeah, that's really important because that brings money directly into the school.
I also would like to point out that I don't know if it can only be done once annually, but if there's a change in status, that there's an opportunity for them to apply later if the family circumstances change. So just communication.
Right.
And Heidi, is it correct that we need to abide by the paid lunch equity tool as far as the minimum?
We do.
Okay.
So
All right,
are they paying cash? Do we know?
I'm sorry?
I was just thinking about the coin shortage. Are there a lot of kids that are paying cash?
Honestly, I don't know. I couldn't tell you how much, how many pay. I'm thinking a lot of kids, when they're in school, that's what they pay with is cash.
We find that a lot of the kids from lower social economic households do pay in cash more frequently. And one other thing that we need to keep in mind as well is that if the cafeteria worker is going to need to count out change, it's going to slow the line down considerably, and there's more passing back and forth of items, which is something that we're working really hard in the cafeteria's plan to minimize. That's the person-to-person touching and the opportunity for students to be touching anything.
I mean, I know it's more coins, but change 25 cents is still counting change. I'm wondering if the cafeteria could do something like, if a student had $4 with them, they could credit the 75 cents to their account or something like that. So offer to sort of prepay in that way, add it to their account rather than get necessarily counting change.
So students do have that option. If someone comes in and pays in $10, they can say, put it on my account.
Yeah.
I would say, having stood by and watched quite a bit, most kids won't do that. They'll take the cash and spend it.
Okay,
Buy a candy bar at the end of the day.
Right.
is this a decision has to be made tonight, or could we table this and come back to it, and you can look into it a little further? So next meeting.
It needs to be made tonight so that they can send out the applications to the families.
It's part of that opening that we need to communicate out to parents.
And could we revise it in a month or so if things just really aren't working? Or strategize on, we can't raise the lunch prices, but
Well, I think you know we can do something.
I mean, if you want to change it later, I'm sure you can.
I wouldn't do that to families. I was just thinking about the different approaches to potentially mitigating it.
I would like to suggest we just keep it at $3, see how the season goes. We may not be in school in 2 months. You don't know what's going to happen. And if we need to use Gopher funds to cover the difference to reduce change and harm to the families, it might be a better way to go.
I'm not sure. Heidi, can we do that legally?
I'm not really sure the legal, I really have to investigate it and research it, but I know because we're part of the lunch program and we get funds from that, this is their requirement. It's been fairly new over the past 5 years that we have to complete this, and it basically dictates to us what we have to charge.
The least we can charge.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
9 cents just doesn't feel right at all. All right, are we ready
At 310? Yeah.
to vote on 310? Everybody comfortable with that? No?
It's on the floor.
All right. Julie?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Eunice doesn't seem to be there. Okay. Everett?
Yes.
Lila?
Yes.
Jason?
No.
Eliza?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Right. Next. Personnel report. Who would like to run with those nominations and resignations?
Oh, where are we going first here? I'll make a motion to hire the varsity boys basketball coach if you want to go there.
Okay.
Is it Kernan? Kernan Gordon?
Yep.
Ooh, said it right.
Seconded.
Sorry, my dog is going nuts. One sec. Any discussion other than he looks immensely qualified? All right. All those in favor, Julie?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes. Trying to get away from my dog who's listening to your dog.
I got owls going on back here. Everett?
Yes.
Lila?
Yes.
Jason?
Yep.
Eliza?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Okay. Next.
I'll do this run sports. The one was added for the varsity volleyball coach, possibly JV later, but varsity volleyball coach Scott Hutchins.
Okay.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay. Julie?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Everett?
Yes.
Lila?
Yes.
Jason?
Yes.
Eliza?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Yes from me.
I'll make a motion for bookkeeper for SAU 86 and 301 for Pamela Vachon.
Second.
All right, any discussion? Okay, Julie,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Everett,
Yes.
Lila,
Yes.
Jason,
Yes, thank goodness.
Eliza,
Yes.
Brandy,
Yes.
and a yes from me.
Make another motion, we hire for the IT help desk support technician, Matthew Dumond.
Dumond, I think.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, Julie,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Everett,
Yes.
Lila,
Yes.
Jason,
Yes.
Eliza,
Yes.
Brandy,
Yes.
and a yes from me.
There are no other hires, right? Now it's resignations.
It's all of them. No resignations.
We can do the resignations in a batch if there's multiples.
2, right?
So the motion for resignation of Amy Gardner as paraprofessional. And
3. Nancy Devon.
and Nancy DeLong, cafeteria, and Cassandra, how do you say the last name? Dostie. What was she? Paraprofessional. Paraprofessional. All 3 resignations. Thank you.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All right, Julie,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Everett,
Yes.
Lila,
Yes.
Jason,
Yes.
Eliza,
Yes.
Brandy,
Yes.
and a yes from me. And then we have nurse assistant.
And you've already heard this, but just I wanted to point out that we have advertised, there are interviews scheduled. So on September 1st, we will probably bring you a nomination, but I will also be bringing you a funding source because we do not have that right now.
Okay. All right. I'll now open this session of public input. Tom, do we have any public input?
We have a few folks. If anybody would like to comment, go ahead and hit *6 on your phone to unmute yourself. Looks like we're good. We only have 3 folks with us at the moment, so.
Okay. Thanks for joining, everybody. Closing public input. Tim, do we need a non-public session?
I believe you do to discuss negotiation strategy.
Okay. 91A. I don't have it in front of me. If anybody has the number, 91A.
Pam, can that be just a non-meeting for union negotiations?
Okay.
I actually don't know the difference.
You're going to come back.
Yep.
To potentially take action. So I would just go to a regular non-public, take a roll call vote. With the intention of coming back for the purpose of taking an action.
Then which section of 91A then?
Is it A or B? It's right here in the minutes, but.
Oh, yeah, I don't know.
I'll read it to you.
All right, Tim's gonna try to find the right section.
Okay.
Stage for the purpose of discussing negotiation strategy, we can make sure.
Okay. Make a motion to go on non-public for discussing union strategies, and we'll add the section as soon as we find it.
Okay.
Someone wants to second it.
I second.
All right. Julie.
Yes.
Karen.
Yes.
Everett.
Yes.
Emma.
Yes.
Jason.
Yes.
Randy.
Yes.
Yes from. So Tom will need to drop off the phone. Oh,
Yeah, Tim, do you want me to hang out? Tim, you can text me, let me join back in?
I can text you when it's time, yep.
All right, so we'll drop off now and let me know if when you come back.
thank you.
All right.
The motion?
Okay, I make a motion to accept the memorandum of agreement as presented by the superintendent for the Prospect Mountain Teachers Association.
Second.
And then just a note that it was modified by the school board this evening, correct? With recommendations from the school board?
Sure.
Okay.
Modified by the school board.
All right. Any further discussion? All right, Julie.
Yes.
Karen.
Yes.
Everett.
Yes.
Malila.
Yes.
Jason.
Yes.
Brandy.
Yes.
And yes for me. All right, I think that's it. Other business? Future meeting date is September 1st. And go ahead.
You do have 3 committees, Pam,
Mhm.
prior to that. Andy and Heidi needed building and grounds that night. Of course, we'll have finance. So Brandy?
Yes.
Julie, Karen, anybody else regarding policy? Can we think about doing that maybe, well, I don't even know what week it is, but before September 1st.
Got time tonight.
Yeah, you just let me know when I'll make myself available until midnight.
Yeah. I mean, Jay and I have some work to do, and Sharon, before we can give you a list of all the policies, but that could be a couple days' work. That's not a ton.
Sometime next week.
Next week?
Sounds good.
That's the only week between the
We
two
know you
meetings.
And I think I'm an alternate, so just let me know if you need me to alternate. No, not happening. Okay, good night. Are we ready to adjourn? Motion to adjourn?
Thank you for the motion.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Bye, you guys.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, Jay.